Now for the talk we've come here for. Former wildlife guide, budding conservationist, and generally famous person. Tristan, we want to hear from you. Come and grab the microphone.
Thank you, John. Thank you. I think infamous is probably appropriate, but we'll go for famous. Firstly, I want to say a massive thank you to everybody who's come down this evening and for those joining us virtually. It's amazing to be in a room full of such conservation-minded people, and it's very exciting for me to get to speak to you because it's not often I get to speak about my experiences as a safari guide, and of course a massive thank you to Save the Rhino for all the amazing work you do internationally to support such a fantastic keystone species. Now, am I in the wrong place? To address the rhino in the room, for lack of a better word. For those of you I haven't met, my name is Tristan, and I'm probably most well known for appearing in reality TV show. I'm aware this is a far cry from rhino conservation. I'm probably thinking, standing here before me today, but there is another side to me that I feel aligns a lot more with Save the Rhino, and I'd like to talk to you about my safari guide in South Africa. And my love started at a young age. From as young as I can remember, I've been obsessed with animals. If I wasn't watching Steve Irwin or David Attenborough on TV, I was probably digging up the garden, looking for insects, or walking in the woods, looking for all manner of wild and wonderful creatures. Alongside loving animals, I've always found peace and solace in nature. And it's always a place where I felt most connected to myself and to the world around me. And as a man who was born in South Africa, born in South Africa, but I came back. I was always lucky to go back to South Africa with my family, go on safaris, and these were the most amazing times of my life. And my love of animals, passion for conservation started. There's one moment in particular that really resonated with me, and a moment where I found that it really kind of stemmed, and it is where I explored the rest of my life. Before I went in the middle of the bush, walking through the bush, walking over dongas, walking the acacia, we managed to find these bull rhino and myself into an area where time was in our favour. We were downwind from this animal, we sat there and we watched this beautiful bull rhino. It seemed to make sense for me at that stage. And it was absolutely fantastic. And this moment of complete connection and complete peace was something that I wanted to take into my life. And I knew that this was something that I wanted to pursue professionally. Tonight, and this photo on the right, taken in the Serengeti National Park. And somehow, in some amazing world, she flagged me onto a project she was working on, which was a project with Ben Fogu, who was another one of my idols. And we were in the Serengeti National Park filming a documentary about the Great Migration. And I just remember this as the most amazing experience. We were learning from some fascinating conservationists who were making amazing changes to a beautiful part of the world, and also working alongside some fantastic filmmakers who were inspiring in all the work they did. And this was really something that I wanted to pursue with the rest of my life. So I decided to look further afield in terms of career paths. And as any young man comes to that time in his life, he has to decide what the next step is. And I decided I want to be a safari guide. Now, at this stage, I'm living in London, living a bit of a city boy life, going to all the clubs, going to all the bars. It wasn't fulfilling me. I knew there was more to life that I wanted to explore. So I came across a company called... Now, if anybody has heard of Eco Training before, they are the most amazing company, and they are essentially the pioneers and leaders in wildlife and safari guide training in South Africa. They have a whole load of courses where they basically train you to be a professional field guide. Alongside professional field guide courses, they also have university study abroad programs. They offer experiential courses for those people who just want to have an amazing and true wilderness. And all of their courses take place in pristine, unfenced bush camps in the most wild and remote regions of Africa. They have camps in Zimbabwe, Botswana, South Africa, and Kenya. So I enrolled in a Fagasa 55-day level 1 safari guide. My home. And that was my neighbor. 55 days living in this amazing environment, completely unfenced, as you can see. And I learned about the bush. This is the first time in my life I felt I really, really belonged. So what is it to be a Fagasa level 1 field guide? So after 55 days, should you pass the course, you'll be a professional field guide and legally allowed to drive a safari vehicle and guide in a professional environment. And what do we do with our days? So we'd wake up with the sun, we'd go walking in the bush. The bush was our classroom, if you like. And at school, much to my family's disdain, most of my report cards would read, could do better if he applied himself. But this was the first time in my life I felt that I really, really belonged, and learning was a pleasure. And we'd learn about everything: astronomy, astrology, meteorology, grass succession, geology, flora and fauna identification, song, bird calls, identifying animals, how to interact with animals, ethical 4x4 training, of course, conservation issues that the area was facing, and how to support those conservation issues, and a whole load of other things. And it was an absolutely fantastic experience, and really some of the best times of my life. Now, alongside these amazing experiences, I met some amazing people. This was my level 1 course on the left. And there's something incredibly special about an environment like this. And one thing that eco-training does is it brings people together. Now, I don't think there's any place, anywhere else in the world where so many different diverse people from all sorts of different walks of life can come together and connect so instantly. And that's because we all had a passion for wildlife. We had people from Germany. We had a retired firefighter who had lived and worked as a firefighter in Germany for 50 years, and he decided to sack it all off and come to South Africa. We had city traders from the UK, people from Malawi, from the Netherlands, from all sorts of walks of life, but we all got on. And it was an amazing experience to connect with these people on such a deep and emotional way. And that image on the right, was my first day as a professional field guide. And that was my first encounter with an elephant as a guide. And it was amazing to not be a viewer of a wildlife environment, but to be part of it. And that was really special for me. Now, this man, I don't know if you've seen this video before. This is Alan McSmith. And this video might be a little bit controversial, but I was there for this encounter. It went viral on YouTube and TikTok and Instagram in the last few years. But this man changed my life. And let's watch the video, and I'll talk a little bit about the experience after. So as you can see, Alan he's very comfortable in the bush. Now, we used to call this man Rafiki, or the elephant whisperer. This elephant bull had been walking around our camp a lot. This was just on the periphery of our camp on the fire break. And he decided one day to give us a little mock charge. Now, this is probably not an ethical guiding practice. We weren't pushing this animal's comfort zone. We weren't trying to encroach in his environment, but he was in our environment. And one thing that Alan tried to make very clear to us as a mentor for his students was that conservation and living in wilderness it's about connecting with nature. And this is an environment that we used to belong in. We used to walk side by side with these animals. And we used to be able to function in this ecosystem with these animals in a way that we don't these days. We've become so disconnected from nature. And he was a man who really tried to inspire us to reconnect. And as you can see, he's so comfortable here. And he just reminded me that this is an animal who's a little bit pissed off, as most of us are, every single day. And we've got to treat them as such. Respect them and their respect to us. And there's one mantra that Alan really instilled into us. And it's something that I've thought about a lot since he said it to me. And that is that the wilderness is not a place, it's a way of life. Now, what does that mean? Wilderness it's not a place, it's a way of life. And for me, it's about connection. It's about connection to a world that is far beyond our understanding as simple human beings. You know, the conservation of nature is not the conservation of animal species, it's conservation of a sacred way of life, a way where we as human beings belonged in an ecosystem that we have rejected. You know, there's people in this room who do such amazing work for conservation, but really, conservation should be about looking after ourselves and looking after the balance of the planet. And Alan was a man who really inspired me and really changed my outlook on life. So, alongside my field guide, at this stage I'm a field guide, I'm working in the bush, and photography became a passion. Not quite like Lara's, but it's something that I really enjoyed, and it was more because of the subject. Now, I don't know anything about photography really, but what I do love is to photograph beautiful animals in their natural habitat. And that was a passion of mine, which I have continued to this day. Images. Now, I was working as a driving guide in the Kruger National Park at this point. I was an assistant trainee guide at eco training, so I was helping out the instructors, bringing the next generation of field guides through. But I realized that there was an experience, if anybody's been on safari here, you'll know there's a massive difference between being in a vehicle and being foot on the bush. And I thought, I want to take it to the next level. I want to walk with these animals. And I'm going to briefly run through what it takes to become a trails guide. So you have to accumulate a minimum of 200 hours walking on foot in big game territory. You also have to have a minimum of 50 encounters with dangerous game in order to accumulate experience and knowledge on how to handle those animals in a safe environment. Now, I spent about a year and a half working at eco training, accumulating hours. I ended up having about 600 hours on foot and over 150 encounters on foot with big game, dangerous animals. And then you must pass a practical assessment in the field with a mentor. And there's only a handful of mentors. And I think there's only about 50 or so lead guide qualifications that are issued every single year. On top of that, you have to have your advanced rifle handling, your advanced tracking. I actually specialized in, I'm a massive bird nerd, full disclaimer. I specialize as a local bird specialist, which means you have to identify over 250 bird species by sight and sound. So, yeah, people think birding's not cool. I disagree. And this was honestly just being on foot in the bush like that was amazing. So, continued with my photography. Here's some more photos I took whilst working at eco training. And then came the time to get a job as a professional guide in a lodge, and this is where the Makalecki Contractual Park comes in. Now, if anybody's heard of the Makalecki area, I know my family have, they've been there very luckily with me, but this is the most spectacular part of Southern Africa in my mind, for many reasons. Firstly, it's a 24,000 hectare concession, right on the furthest northeast point in South Africa. So there's a border to the north with Zimbabwe and a border to the east with Mozambique. The Limpopo River runs to the north and the Luvuvu River runs to the east. And because of the alluvial floodplains in the area and some other significant geological formations, it boasts a massive biodiversity. So for a relatively small part of the Kruger National Park, it has 75% of the biodiversity in the area, which is absolutely fantastic. Now, I'm going to get onto the Ramsar site later on. That point should be in a next slide. But it's an absolutely fantastic part of the world. More importantly, it's a really interesting story, a conservation story, which I want to tell you tonight, and that is the story of the Makalecki community. Now, it's a sad story that gets a bit happier. So the map I just showed you was the Makalecki Contractual Park. Now, this used to be the ancestral homeland of the Makalecki people. Sadly, in 1969, under apartheid government, the Makalecki people were forcibly removed from the land, and this area was incorporated into the Kruger National Park. Now, in 1995, when the apartheid government collapsed, Mandela was released, under the land tenure reform legislation, the Makalecki people were now able to claim their land back. And in 1998, in what was an amazing and landmark moment for community and government to work together, the land was given back to the Makalecki people. And an amazing agreement was drawn up where the community and SANParks, which is South African National Parks, would work together to put this land aside for conservation. This is a boring slide, a lot of words on it. I'll break it down for you quickly. So the land was given back to the Makalecki people. A joint management agreement was drawn up where the community and the government were going to benefit from this. Any income from the area was to be split 50-50 between the SANParks and the Makalecki community. Anybody who could be employed in the area was to be employed from the Makalecki tribe. The land was to be officially recognized as the Makalecki concession. And there was to be no mining or residence or any other potentially damaging things that could happen on the land without express permission of SANParks. So a really positive thing for the community and for conservation. And it was an amazing opportunity for South Africa to really rewrite its history and put conservation first and community. So I was very proud to be able to call this my home. Alongside all those amazing things, the Makalecki concession was so important because it sat right in the heart of the Greater Limpopo Transfrontier National Park. Now the map you see here to the south, Morozu to the north in Zimbabwe, and Limpopo, Makalecki. And this addition of the Makalecki community concession allowed the Greater Limpopo Transfrontier National Park to have no hole in the middle, and it's now open 35,000 square kilometers of protected wildlife, free-roaming land. And because of the high density of elephants in the Kruger National Park at the time, there was a big issue with the ecosystem collapsing, and this allowed the free movement of animals, which is fantastic for the park, fantastic for the communities surrounding it, and just all in all, an amazing opportunity for conservation. Alongside all those things, I'm getting really excited about this place. Love it. The Makalecki Community Concession was also dedicated as a Ramsar wetland site. Now, Ramsar is a place in Iran, and a Ramsar agreement is essentially an international intergovernmental agreement that protects wetlands areas for migratory birds and waterfowl. So basically, if an area is identified as of ecological significance to waterfowl or other animals, it is internationally protected. And to this day, there are 171 governments working together, and Ramsar protects over 255 million hectares of wetlands, which is absolutely fantastic. So the birding in Makalecki, for you birders, not that many of you, was absolutely fantastic and something I was very excited about. Now, there are 2 commercially operating lodges on this property, so that is very small. If you take an area like Sarby Sands or the Sarby Game Reserves, there's loads of lodges, massive road networks. On this concession, there's only 2, which is fantastic for the animals and the wildlife. So this is the Outpost Lodge, which, and that image up on the left is Lana Gorge, as you can see, absolutely stunning area. And then Pafuri Camp, and this is where my first professional guiding job happened, and this was to be my home. Now, I spent my summers, when the rains had come and the water was high and the grass was thick, guiding from the lodge here. This was the view from my room in the mornings, which was very special, just for context, so you didn't think I was filming in the bush. And in the winters, when the trail season opened, this is where it gets really exciting, I would base myself these mobile trail camps, which were completely broken down in summer so the land could regrow. And I would essentially run slack pack trails, which is where you carry all of your equipment, your water, your food. You go into the bush, and you spend at least 4 nights sleeping under the stars, taking turns doing watch, and just having the best time ever. This was me. Very different to Makalecki. And I was, some of the encounters we had, I mean, the biodiversity there was absolutely stunning. The walking was fantastic. As I said, very minimal road networks. There was only 8 roads in a property that was 24,000 hectares, which is nothing, really. So perfect for walking. And I got to take my amazing family with me, which was great. Now, because of the nature of this geographical location of the property, there were a few issues. As you can see, this is the Limpopo River, and it is relatively low at this point here. Now, one of our responsibilities as a trails team in the Kruger National Park and in the Makalecki concession was that we worked very closely with the Sandparks Rangers. Now, this area is so remote and wild. It is about 6 hours from the nearest town, and the infrastructure in terms of support for rangers and funding is very minimal, which was a problem. Now, as I said, there's a border to the north with Zimbabwe, and because of that, there was a lot of footfall and a lot of traffic from people illegally crossing into South Africa from Zimbabwe. And part of our job was to carry out snare sweeps and patrol areas that often people would infiltrate for poaching. Now, predominantly, bushmeat poaching was an issue, and a lot of people would lay snares down, and this is something that we came across a lot. And very sadly, as much as these communities are suffering, and Zimbabwe, that area of Zimbabwe was really bad for the people who were living there, and they didn't have many other options. Lots of other animals got caught in these snares, and part of our job was also to humanely put down animals that were in snares but hadn't died yet. So, just to display images you might not enjoy on the next slide, but these were this is a buffalo I found that had been caught in a snare, and then sadly an elephant that we had to put down. I didn't want to put the photo of the elephant, but you get the gist. Now, because of the community having owned this land beforehand, all of the wildlife in this, so either coming south from Zimbabwe or coming north through southern regions of the Kruger National Park, but there was a massive keystone species that was missing. Now, I'd like to tell you this is a happy story. Sadly, it's not. But they identified that there hadn't been any rhinos in the area for over 120 years. So there was a program called the Makalecki Large Mammal Reintroduction Program was born, and the hopes of this program was to introduce a breeding nucleus of white rhino to the Makalecki concession. So initially they put 6 white rhino into the concession to see what would happen. Within the first week, one of the dominant bulls moved south to find a mate, and two of the radio transmitters had stopped working after 4 weeks. Now this is a photo I took first month of working there. And these animals were very elusive, as I said, very minimal road network, very difficult terrain to navigate, and very understaffed, so we didn't have rangers who could be spending all the time with them there. And that is why, organisations like Save the Rhino are so essential, because we need more funding in these areas. Now, encounters with these animals. This is a photo I took at Dekazan Spring, which is a bit of a hangout for these rhinos. And there was one opportunity I got to take a lovely photo, but sadly, I changed the colours on this and I posted it and the caption was a utopian world. And that kind of, for me, was about a world where the grass is pink and animals like rhinos don't get poached. Sadly, it's not a world we live in. Now, in my last few months of working at Pafuri, I very sadly came across the slaughtered carcass of a cow and a calf, and those are the last rhinos that were Makalecki. So in my time there, we went from 4 to 0. And that was over 4 years. It's really sad, and as I said, this is why organisations like Save the Rhino are so essential, because the work they do really does make a massive difference. And I hope one day to see rhinos in this part of the world, and with people like you, hopefully that can happen. Now, on a happier note, alongside being a walking guide in the Kruger National Park, I organise overlanding expeditions to remote regions of southern Africa. And one expedition took us up to the border of Namibia and Angola in any region, which is you guys are very familiar with. And I was able to firsthand see the amazing black rhinos that inhabit this area. And it was absolutely spectacular and a really, really special thing to see. If anybody hasn't been to any region, it is absolutely fantastic. It's wild, it's remote, there's nothing there. And to see free-ranging black rhinos is just mind-blowing. So thank you. Let's do up there. Another lovely photo. There's also a giraffe in the back as well. I didn't quite make the crop, but quite cool to see all those species together. I continued traveling Southern Africa, taking photos and enjoying my time out there. But sadly, my time as a guide in Southern Africa came to an end. I had an awful bout of malaria, and I couldn't do my job anymore. I had malaria 3 times in 2 years, and it absolutely wiped me out. So it was time to come back to the UK and to reassess what was the next step. I do a lot of fundraising in the UK. My friends and I, who worked in the guiding community, we started the Chembo Foundation, which was born in COVID. And the whole point was to support rangers and unemployed guides in the area who were suffering because of the lack of tourism. Now, we broke the world record for the amount of burpees ever done in a month, which was, in hindsight, fun at the time. Not so much. And we managed to raise over R1 million, which is about £45,000 in this one fundraising. We broke the record for the amount of times, this is a very niche record, the amount of, we circumnavigated the world 5 times on foot in a month as a community. So across the world, we had people from about 46 countries from our guiding community who got on board with this. And we tried to get a massive international effort. We raised another £1 million. We cycled bikes, ran a few marathons, did a few cycling events, and collectively we raised over £130,000 for rhino conservation. Now, there's a lot of other projects which I would love to be able to talk to you guys this evening about, but they're on the pipeline, and very exciting, they will be bringing back to Africa very soon. So maybe next year, I'll come back and we can talk about those. But wildlife conservation and my passion for animals never died. I like to think as everything I've done from that point when I started guiding has led me to here, even Made in Chelsea. You know, for me, it was about being able to build a profile, get a following, and spread the message loud and as wide as possible. You know, when I was a guide, one of my most amazing moments was to have first-time visitors to Africa and to see the look in their eyes when they see a rhino for the first time or they see the sun setting over the savannah for the first time. And that, for me, was incredibly inspiring. And it's something I wanted to reach to as many people as possible. So on social media now, I try and work with amazing causes like Save the Rhino and various other people and try and spread the message of conservation. And for me, a lot of people ask me, what can I do for conservation? You know, what difference can I can say, become a conservationist. Conservation is anybody, to simplify the point, conservation is anybody who dedicates a significant amount of their resources or time to a cause that they feel passionately about, whether that be a single species, an ecosystem, or even the parkland down the road. Any single person can make a difference. Identify a passion, aim towards it, do what you do best. Conservationists are painters, they're artists, they're business owners, policymakers, politicians, anybody can be a conservationist. Do what you do best and go at it from a conservation mindset. And I want to leave you with a question. This is a question that Alan McSmith, the Elephant Man, said to me one day. And we sat around the campfire listening to the lions in the evening and the elephants rumbling. And he said to me, Tristan, what legacy will you leave? Everybody can leave a legacy. Identify what you want to do and act on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Tristan. That was amazing. When we come back, we're going to have 2 seats up here for some questions. So, and the one thing I will say is being a birder in South Africa is no light. I know South Africans who will look at our biggest volume. I'll just look down the notes and ask you if that's the pocket edition. They have a lot of birds. Have a drink and some refreshment if you're in the room, or if you're at home, go and grab. Those are where they were before. You come back. In the room, particularly come up with some good ones, and we'll see you in 5 minutes. Thank you very much. Come and grab a seat, sir. Thank you, sir. We're juggling one microphone, so we might have to throw it around a bit. But thank you so much. We're back for the last session of the evening, which is we've got Tristan here. As I say, we've also got the other people you've heard from tonight sitting in various front bits of the audience. So it's question time. I hope you had a chance to think as you were grabbing a drink there, if you got any questions. There was one came in online earlier, and we can open with that while people get a chance to warm up. But somebody came in online and asked, what was your favourite moment? You've had these wonderful experiences out in Southern Africa and in other places. Is there one that sticks out for you and you would say, if I could take one memory with me, one amazing moment, that was it?
What a tough question to ask. So many, honestly. I reckon my most special moment was so many. Do you know, I love rhinos so much, but I really connected with elephants massively when I was out there. And I feel like they are such intelligent, sentient animals. And I remember one moment when I was in the trails camp and all the guests had gone to sleep and I was just putting the fire and ready for the morning. And this massive big bull elephant, we were going to sleep and he up having a whiskey by the fire after the guests had gone to sleep. And he walked straight past me about 2 meters away. And he stopped there. I just remember him. He knew what was going on. He knew I was just chilling out, having a good time. And he was doing his business. And I felt we had this really intimate moment. So for me, that was a very special moment. I was back to this animal. So that would probably be it.
There are moments when one connects with an animal from another species, and whether it's you and your dog, or you're riding a horse, or you're sharing a whiskey with an elephant. Those moments, yeah, it is, isn't it? You can have that one. Those moments are magical. People in the audience or people online, if you're sending questions through, the floor is open. Yes. I feel like I'm back being a school teacher. You don't have to put your hands up, but please.
Yes, I just want to know really why the Makalecki herding had the 6 rhino introduced a few years back, and were they considered doing it again? And why do we feel that, or do you think that they actually went from 6 to 0?
I'll repeat the questions because we've only got the one mic. So that's a question about the Makalecki rhinos. Why was the original seed population only 6 rhinos? Would they think about repeating the exercise? What's the current situation with rhinos in Makalecki?
So I don't think they would, in short. Sadly, the numbers of white rhino in South Africa are dwindling. And because of the geographical location of the Makalecki community, concession, it is very, very hard to support and to have rangers in there and have people on the ground stopping people infiltrating these areas. So it's such a wild and remote region, which makes it very hard to police, in short. So I think it was an amazing idea that the large mammal reintroduction program was born to do, but I think until there's proper support, proper infrastructure, and proper funding in that area, I don't think that people would reintroduce rhinos into that area. I think it was really sad. You know, we went from having 4 rhinos when I was there to 0 in 3 years, which is, it shouldn't be happening. You know, we live in a world where these animals are dwindling so quickly, and it's too much of a risk, I think, at this point.
Just to add that Makalecki's at the north end of the Kruger Park, the very north of it. When I started here 4 years ago, the figures that we had were that there were 9,000 white rhinos and 450 black rhinos in Kruger. And then they reran the survey, and it turned out there were 2,500, not 9,000, white rhinos in the Kruger Park. And the black rhinos are down to just over 200 probably. The rhinos in Kruger have been decimated. Which is why there was such a big push. There was a big poaching surge in KwaZulu-Natal to the south and east of Kruger last year that we were having to run appeals for because the poachers have done so much damage in Kruger, and now they've moved south and east and are hitting other areas. So it's such a challenge. It is very, very tough. More people. Yes.
What do you think kind of skills you need if you were kind of interested in, like, you live in a city and you wanted to go out and do something like you do? Kind of, for most people, feels quite sort of far away from maybe their regular lives.
So for the people who were not in the room, did you always want to be a game changer? There was a question about were you very academic at school, which there were then laughter from some people who I think are your family at the back. And then, but yes, it's an odd contrast in life between being made in Chelsea. I mean, I was made in Tottenham. We're London boys. And yet you end up a very long way from here in a very different part of the world doing something completely different.
In answer to was I academic? No. I've always felt I was more of a practical learner. I loved adventure. I've always lived this kind of romantic novel in my head of kind of the adventures I want to go on. Grew up reading Wilbur Smith and various other stories, and I always wanted to explore and kind of be hands-on and be in the field. And I wasn't an academic person. I'm not a scientist. So I thought, what can I do? And I love people as well. I love creating an experience for people. I love sharing that with people. I love interacting with new people. And it seemed like a very obvious career path for me. I'd spent a lot of time going on safaris as a young boy. The guide was always this man, or woman, often. My boss was a woman, amazing. And I've always felt that what they do for people's first time visits to Africa and what they do for the animals and the stories they tell and the experience they create was something that I could do. I felt like it was suited to my skills, and I just love being practical and in the field. And it is a far cry from Made in Chelsea. And I also I battled that for a long time. I felt almost pulled in two directions. And I had this, am I a London boy? Am I a safari kid? What do I do? And then, after a while I made peace with it. I realized I could actually do both. And so everything I've done up until this point has really been to try and incorporate my love of wildlife and adventure and passion for conservation, and then try and reach a bigger audience. And guiding was amazing. Definitely recommend it for anybody.
I will add, somebody asked us in the break before Tristan did his talk, how do you get into the conservation world? And I completely agree with you. You can be. We used to have a tagline on the bottom of our emails a couple of years ago that just said, "Thank you for being a rhino conservationist, whoever you are, whatever you're doing. If you're supporting rhinos, as you say." But even if you want to get into conservation, we do get that question: how do you get into this world? There's 10 of us at Save the Rhino, and there are 10 different stories of how people got into conservation. I used to work at WWF in the UK, where there were 250 of us, and there were 250 different stories. You can come into conservation as a game ranger. You can come in as a lawyer. You can come in as a policy wonk who's excited about government policy. You can come in as somebody who just really loves elephants and loves communicating their love of elephants to people. There are 1,001 routes in, but it's, I think, what you said earlier. If you've got the love, you'll find a way. Yeah. More people. Yes, Lara. Hi.
I think I have two questions.
Excellent.
So maybe
Very, very good question. For people who didn't hear that, I'll paraphrase it. How does one balance the materialism and sometimes opulence of the lifestyle of something like Made in Chelsea with the need for sustainability that we all understand as conservationists?
You want to answer that one? Very, very good question, Lara. Do you know, it's a very good question. Again, I battled with it for a long time. You know, when I started the show, the reality is, you know, I'm a Chelsea boy who loves animals. So the show is about my life as much as it is anyone else's. So I had the idea of cumulative causation in the sense of I can jump on board the ship and try and steer it in a direction. You know, on Chelsea, I've hosted a number of wildlife conservation events. I've had exhibitions on there. Coming up, we've got an event with Save the Rhino. So it's an opportunity to share to kind of share my passion and to try and reach as many people as possible. You know, if people follow me from being on a show and they watch this, or they see me on socials, or they see me in South Africa trying to make a difference, you know, for me, that's all I can do. In response to the kind of the opulence and stuff, I feel like we need a rewiring in terms of what our priorities look like. I think the way that people are going is very kind of, you know, the consumption of everything, you know, it's on to the next thing. And I think if there are people in positions who can influence others, who are trying to do something different, and there's enough of us in different sectors or different worlds, different shows, different whatevers, I feel like that's a good start at trying to make a difference. So it's a tough one. If you can't beat them, join them and try and beat them from the inside, really.
Thank you. I think there's a lot of people ask the what can I do question, particularly when you're looking at the big global challenges that threaten the natural world and rhinos from our point of view in particular. And we used to say to people that, you know, you are who you are. Yes, you're an individual, but you're also a voter. You're a customer. You maybe are influential. You may be on the PTA board at school. You're probably an employee or an employer. You look at all those different facets of your life. You may well be an influencer. Wherever that is. We've got a couple of people with fantastic Instagram profiles in the room. There are so many facets to who any of us are. And if what we want to do is take that sustainability message forward, there are so many different ways in which we can do it. Anybody who says, oh, you know, I'm only one person, you've got umpteen voices that you can use if you want to. More people. Hello. Yes.
I had a question around just your opinion on this topic. So I was interested in your opinion on technology and its use in conservation. So you by working with organisations in this area and just your experience on the ground, technology, it's in using camera traps in the area or the use of drones nowadays. Some conservationists use this. What's your experience or what do you think will happen in the future around using technology in conservation?
So, fantastic question about technology and conservation and the value of technology in conservation. Over to you, sir.
I think technology is amazing. And I think as great as it is, it can always be used on both sides. Now, I worked very closely with anti-poaching units in South Africa, and we had a massive problem with the poachers using drones. So as much as we can use it for conservation, it can be used against us. There's so many different technologies, obviously the amazing radio transmitters and how easy it is to track animals and work closely beside them. Technology is changing the game, but it's also making it a lot harder to manage. So I think it's about managing how it's used against us and trying to use it as much as we can for us. Yeah, it's a tough one. In the field, it was definitely an issue with drones and something that and we struggle with massively. So it'll be interesting to see where it goes, obviously, as technology advances and, you know, anybody can get into anywhere really and see anything. So I'm probably not the best to answer it, but it's something we struggle with as people who are on the ground with drones and that kind of stuff. Maybe you've got more of a...
I can give one or two, and then I'm going to bring Kathy in, who's CEO and is the expert on this. You mentioned camera traps. I'll share an experience from Russia where we put camera traps out to pick up tigers. They were the ones with the SIM card in. So as soon as they pick up a picture, they'll send it to somebody's mobile phone, which is brilliant. And the first thing we started picking up was not tigers, it was people. And some of those people had guns. and they were wandering into national parks, and we suddenly realised that a 400 quid camera trap with a SIM card in it can do the job of one of the guards, and they'll be on duty 24 hours a day. And again, as you say, it turns into a game of cat and mouse, because the potential poachers very soon pick up on this, and we have to get better and better at hiding our camera traps. But the technology can be amazing. Similarly, for picking up elephants who are about to come into arable fields and start raiding crops, and then guns come out and bad things happen. But if the people in the village, somebody has a mobile phone and they get forewarning, they can be out there banging their dustbin lids and doing non-lethal things, and the elephants take one look and think, no, thank you, and disappear off back into the bush. So the technology can be fantastic. It has its limitations, and as you say, it can be used against us as much as for us. And at that point, Kathy, if you don't come in here, you won't be on the camera. So.
Thanks, John. Yeah, technology can very much be a force multiplier. And in some of the reserves and parks that we support, for example, the Kanani region in Namibia, where Darren was talking about, or in, for example, Mkuzi Reserve in South Africa, budgetary constraints have meant that when rangers have retired or been moved on, they haven't been replaced. And so you're trying to do the same job with ever fewer people. And that's where camera traps and transponders and so on, whether that's in rhinos or vehicles, can make a world of difference. CCTV, number plate recognition. You can get a hell of a lot of great information, not through eyes on the ground, but through your technology. The problem is that technology is only as good as the people who operate it. And, I've seen fairly wild claims about, injecting rhino horns, making them radioactive. And then if they were to go through a scanner at an airport, it would send a trigger. And lo and behold, you would get your rhino traffickers. It just needs a corrupt airport official to tip a cup of coffee into that scanner at the wrong time, and you've destroyed the technology. With drones, from our appeal that we ran before Christmas, it was raising money for 2 areas in KwaZulu-Natal. We've gone to the guys on the ground and said, what do you really, really need? And one of them was looking at drones. Now, drones have come a lot since, the first demo I saw was 2012. And then it was, 15 minutes, line of sight, not in windy conditions. You had to be able to set up a camera. It could do a straight line out and back. It's come on a lot since then. But the reality is that actually to get a license to fly a drone that captures evidence that is admissible in court, it is just as rigorous as getting your private pilot's license. And how many people can you afford to put through that training? Maybe 2 per park? What happens if they're on leave? What happens if they're sick? Can you get them to the spot? There was discussion about whether... So with training, rangers are much better at, if they hear a shot, they're better at identifying what direction it came from and how far that was. So the idea is you fly a drone, you see how far how far away it is from the observation post, from the listening post. And in theory, you put a drone up there, you can see the likely run that the poachers are making. But if you can't give them the training, if you can't get the rangers there, no tech works without human intervention. So yes, it's great, but so also is, to be honest, a lot of the grant money we spend is on boosting ranger morale. Uniforms, rations, kit, equipment, tents that don't leak, sleeping mats that have air in them. It's getting the basics right. That's such an important part of what we do. You'll know from your time out in the bush that actually giving people good living and working conditions and keeping that morale up, that's how to tackle this. The people that we've been working with have been facing risks to their lives for the last 15 years. And you don't do that because you're thinking, I could operate this new bit of tech. You're trying to provide them with a life that they can live, work, grow, have the camaraderie, and get home safely to their families at night. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I mean, we ran an appeal in the middle of last year and to support rangers particularly in Kenya. And we weren't buying them technology and drones, we were buying them life insurance. That's what they need. It's the human at the end of the day, as Kathy says, that makes the difference. Fantastic question. More. Let's talk conservation. Yes, please. Question is, are we hopeful for the future of rhinos? There you go.
Of course, you have to be hopeful. You know, we're all in this room today because we're hopeful and we want to make a difference. And no, thanks to people like Save the Rhino, there is hope. So as far and as wide as you can spread this message, please do. You know, reach out to people in your community, do whatever you can, make a difference. And if everybody does, rhino conservation will be a lot easier, and these guys will have a lot easier job. So of course, yeah, I'm hopeful. Without hope, there's nothing really. And there are so many amazing people around the world who are dedicating their lives, literally risking their lives, to conserve keystone species like the rhino. So if we don't have hope in this room here, how are they going to go out and do their job? So that's the least we owe them, to be honest.
Hard question. Speaking personally, I'm hopeful for African rhinos. The main threat is poaching, and although it's a very tough test, we know how to be effective against poaching most of the time, touch wood, given enough resources, etc. But law enforcement, wildlife protection is incredibly difficult, but we're getting pretty good at it globally. So, and the more pressure that there is, the more intense the protection of the smaller number of rhinos that's left. So do I think we'll lose the rhinos in Africa to poaching? No, I think we've got a tough fight ahead, but I think we're going to win it. I have two concerns. One of them is the big global stuff. I don't think any of us, including me, and I read the reports, understand what kind of impact climate change could have in the next 20 to 30 years on the places where rhinos live. And there's nothing that kills wildlife like several years of drought. You can't pick up an entire population and move them. But the other one is we're talking about rhinos in Africa, and of course the ones that are really threatened now, imminently, are the ones in Indonesia, where there's fewer than 80 of both species left. And once you get down to those kind of individual numbers, you're beginning to name animals, then you really are up against it. Am I hopeful? Yeah, there's good work going on, but we really are close to the edge with the Indonesian rhinos. And if it would only take one thing to go really wrong, a surge in poaching, that volcano blows up that's sitting next to the Javan rhinos, and things could go downhill very, very fast. So I think globally, I think we humans, the trajectory of human development has generally been up. As a species, we're not quite as stupid as we sometimes try to pretend we are. I think we have beaten a lot of other challenges over the last few hundred years. We will get the hang of living sustainably. I think we'll get better at it. And probably 100 years from now, people will look back at what we used to do now and they'll shake their heads in disbelief, and the world will be a better place. Our role, I think, our generation, the next generation, probably the one after that, is to limit the damage while we're learning. I do think we'll learn, but we might make a real mess of things in the meantime unless amazing people like all of you guys and like Tristan work really hard to limit the damage. It's not quite as wildly optimistic as your answer, but yeah, it's you work with this stuff all day. It's a challenge to stay optimistic, but I think that's the overwhelming mood. Other people? Yes.
I had the privilege of working in Burkalo, the zoo in the Czech Republic. The last known rhinos, Sudan, Latvia, and Kenya. Do you think that these individuals, when the world knows their individual names,
To get the first shot. I think if we can name the individual animals and the last remaining animals left, we're in a position we shouldn't be in, to be honest, in short. I think ideally there'd be so many bloody rhinos we wouldn't be able to name them all. Sadly, that's not. Obviously, when we get down to these numbers, there's a lot more international press, you know, where people are starting to realise what's going on, but ideally, at the stage where there's only a few. But the overall benefit for conservation of people being more aware of this, you know, it's because, yeah, in an ideal world, we wouldn't be able to name them all. But sadly, we can. I'm sure you've got a much more concise answer.
I completely agree with you. Yeah, they can be a highly effective communication tool. You know, you've got 2 left, they've got names. That's a real emotional sucker punch. And as communicators, we can use that to really try and get that message across. But the fact that that's what we've got to work with is absolutely tragic. We should be talking about populations, we should be talking about numbers, and those numbers should be in the hundreds and thousands. By the time you name them and people are following them on Instagram, it's very late, very late. But a good question. Thank you for that. Anyone else? It's lovely to have such a conservation crowd. Kenneth, please.
Curiosity question. Do you think your rhinos in, is it Makalecki, got nailed deliberately, or was it opportunistic? And then a follow-up, silly question really, but when are you going to run the Four Rangers Ultra?
I definitely want to run the Four Rangers Ultra, in short. I'm up. I'm signed up. And I think it was, there's so much activity in these areas coming in every single day. And this definitely wasn't an opportunistic crime. We'd noticed a lot more increased activity in these areas. This is an area where the rhinos used to hang out. That's actually quite far away from the way. So it's about 10 kilometers in, which is the area where the rhinos used to inhabit because it was more favorable for their conditions. So this was definitely planned. We do have rangers on site, and there was actually, well, I know for a fact that it was planned because sadly, one of the vets and one of the section rangers was arrested for crime afterwards. So this is the problem, you know. The people who should be conserving these animals are often on the inside. So, you know, the vet and the section ranger were arrested and released 2 weeks later. So it's really hard to fight this problem when the inside information is being leaked, and it's very upsetting, to be honest, because these are the people who should be really focused on protecting them. So, yeah, that was definitely a planned operation.
And some of the work, and there's very little we can say about it in public, but a lot of the work we do nowadays is about tracking down, finding new and novel ways of identifying some of those people who are working on the inside. And if we can find out who those people are and get them out of there, it makes a huge difference. Kathy could give a whole evening's talk on some of the amazing work that's going on with trying to identify the good guys and the bad guys and separating them out. But that's a whole other story. And a lot of it pretty candid. Do you want to come in and say?
Actually, it was just so if you remember back to when Tristan showed the map and he explained the importance of the area in relation to Zimbabwe and across to Mozambique and the Greater Limpopo Transfrontier Conservation Area, Gonoro National Park to the north is a success story. So it's a national park in Zimbabwe, used to have black rhinos, all were poached to extinction in the 1980s. There was an attempt to reintroduce rhinos around the turn of the millennium, again poached to extinction. About 10 years ago, the Frankfurt Zoological Society signed an agreement with the Zimbabwe National Parks and Wildlife Management Authority to build up the park security, the infrastructure and so on, and to get the park rhino ready. And about 3 years ago, 4 years ago, my chronology's gone a bit off. COVID does that to you. But they translocated in 25 black rhinos from overstocked areas in Zimbabwe, particularly private reserves that had managed to resist poaching. And those animals are safe. There has been no poaching since the reintroduction. They are breeding, there are calves, they're putting in tourism, they're doing all that good stuff to build community support. If you haven't got the support of the periphery, of the communities living around the boundary of a national park, slightly different from a community reserve where you might have settlements within the park, but so far it is a success story. And if you can protect your area from the north, Mozambique has got some great people working in there now, you begin to sort of rebuild that, the security, but it's the community goodwill. It doesn't get talked about enough yet. And what you talked about in the presentation about the employment policy, the empowerment, the capacity building, we focus too much on the militarization of conservation. Actually, if you haven't got the people with you, you might as well give up and stop now. So I think there is hope. I think one day we might see rhinos back in the far north of Kruger. Maybe not now, but there's a huge amount of land that's ready and waiting for rhinos.
Thanks, Kathy. It's 8:30, which I think was pretty much what we had penciled as wrap-up time. We've had some amazing questions. Thank you for that. We've probably got time for one more if anybody has a question that they're bursting to ask. Otherwise, we may have exhausted everybody's question asking potential. I'm looking around and I can't see. Yes. There are 5 species of rhino, and 3 of them are critically endangered. Absolutely. And they are all in danger one way or another. They're vulnerable, all of them. Yes, very much indeed. I think that's it. I think we're questioned out. It falls to me to say thank you so much, Tristan. That's been a brilliant evening.
To Save the Rhino for having me down this evening. And as John said, anybody can be a conservationist. There's no clear-cut line. People ask me all the time, what can I do to make a difference? And you can connect with people like Save the Rhino. You can share the message in your community. Everybody has a voice. Everybody has ears. And if you inspire people, they will make a difference. So identify what your passion is, act on it, and try and inspire as many people as possible.
Thank you.